What is the worst job you've ever had? Loan officer at a title loan office. We basically loaned people money who couldn't get a loan from the bank or people with really bad credit. I hated loaning money to people who I knew couldn't pay it back. When they couldn't pay it, I basically could do anything to get the money they owed us. I remember a lady died once during the pandemic and she owed us like $8,000. The company told me to dig through her estate and find the money and get it. They wanted me to call the family the day of the woman's funeral and ask about the money. That was it for me. I left after that. Loading trucks at UPS. I was horrific at it. Just 2 hours of packages coming down the belt. I'd have to load 3 or 4 trucks. Ideally you load the packages neatly on the shelf they belonged on in the numerical order they belonged in. I will be having Tetra-stream nightmares about the job. Only reason I took the job was for the Teamsters medical benefits. I told my supervisor that the day that ACA passed I was gonna come in and quit. I did. I have a lot of respect for the guys and ladies working the preload. It isn't an easy job and it's worse during peak season. Being a furniture salesman. Small private shop, owner was paranoid. I could not show customers any of the thousands of options we had in catalogs, only the 15 or so items we had on display. Could not tell them the price of said items, had to refer them to him. He thought every customer was a spy from another shop. Shop was also in the shittiest location possible, so had only like 1-3 walk-ins in a day. Ended up having to sue the fucker to get paid when the shop went bankrupt from owing millions knocked to vendors. Lawyer paid me though, so guess it could have been worse. Clothing retail Kohl's. It wasn't about the place itself, it's just about the job itself. My favorite was working the register in jewelry because I was actually doing something important. Having to clean up people's clothes and fold hang clothes for hours was stupid. I hate doing my own laundry, so constantly doing it for others and never finishing was the worst time in my life. There's no benefit to that part of the job at all. I can't say that I'm making anyone happy. I had a better and more rewarding time when I was a CNA wiping people's butts. Store manager for Fast and All. It went from a guaranteed $50,000 year take-home truck commission amazing benefits to a fucking joke of a salary $22,000 year and having a complete dick shit of a district manager up your ass over every little thing. Take over a store the previous guy fucked and did all kinds of shady shit to meet their goal? Your fault. They were buying store stock under a dummy account to make it look like actual sales. Wait, no, that's still better than being a consultant for salon-centric State Beauty. Never mind. Cutting fancy glass for use in mosaics. A glass cutter is basically a pin, with a small metal wheel on one end, and a metal ball on the other. Fancy glass is thick, heavy, expensive and sharp. The weight, thickness and texture changes drastically. One may be a 3 cm smooth green glass sheet, the next may be a textured 5 cm piece of orange. There is no training. Glass dust is a thing. My fingertips were swollen with tiny shards of glass and I broke much more glass than I was worth. It was a short gig, transferring chickens from a small long cage on a semi-truck to a crew in a barn. To reach the chickens we had to crawl on our bellies in the cage, then grab 3 chickens in each hand, climb down the ladder, walk to the barn and stuff them in a cage, all while the fucking chickens are clawing at your arm. All of this happened in 90 weather, and when we were done they didn't pay us but promised that they would send us a check. Never happened. I was only 16 when that happened. Learned a couple of important things that day. Working at this fast food place called AW in our local mall. Had some dudes try to fight me there because they were drunk and being rude, so I told them to knock it off. Had Karens throw burgers that I didn't make at the counter and yell at me even though I was only on register. This was my first job out of the Navy for the time being while I was in college, and my supervisor was the boss's daughter who just turned 18 and I was 24 at the time, having to take orders from some spoiled high school kid. Now it was terrible. My first job working in the kitchen of a fairly nice restaurant. The owner was a stereotypical chef, extremely anal and impatient. He stood over me constantly and he yelled at me to work faster, and fully expected me to be able to do tasks as quickly as he could on my little first day. I also discovered pretty quickly that I'm just not good at that type of work. I lasted 4 days, then school was starting back and I asked him about setting my work schedule on school. He told me just focus on school. Thank goodness. Working for travel insurance claims in March 2020 onwards. I would create claims for canceled flights, hotels, traveling car centers, etc. Except after COVID really hit. The companies were only offering vouchers for future use and we could not issue any refunds. X200B. Telling people who just lost their jobs we can't get them their money back was awful. It was 8 hours every day for months of endless verbal abuse from customers. I completely understand where they were coming from, but man, that job sucked. Warehouse at a certain well-known surf skate casual clothing company based in San Diego. Hired on as a temp, promised to transition to full employee because of my resume and was told that's just how they do things. Turns out from talking to other temps that have been there a year it's just a straight up lie. Literally got yelled at because I couldn't scan items in half the building due to the network in the building not covering the areas. Simply walked out after a week. Bummer because I liked the product. Processing salmon in Alaska, glad for the experience, but 16-hour days for 3 months in the middle of nowhere was intense. You only got a day off if no fish came in. Lodging was a little shack on the beach with a foam pad. We had to burn all waste. So the bathrooms had trash bins that you would toss used TP in. The smell was so bad. All the food was flown in by bush plane. So it was dehydrated stuff and salmon for every meal. I honestly never got tired of eating salmon, but the dehydrated stuff sucked. I've had jobs that many people would think were bad, e.g. fast food worker, but were fine. My actual worst job was actually a summer internship in academia. The job was sitting at a computer for 8 hours a day circling objects and images. And my boss was not very nice, had a huge ego, threatened to revoke my funding because I took too many breaks, and said I once cut out to be in academia. I have been screamed at by bosses and customers at service industry jobs, but that was the only time a job made me cry. I had a security job where I was shot at twice, had countless knives pulled on me, witnessed over a dozen shootings, found 2 dead bodies at the beginning of my shift, and had to literally fight for my life once. I called out sick from a hospital bed after that fight and my boss demanded I be at work the next day. I found a new job very quickly after that, put in 2 weeks' notice, got written up for some bullshit during those 2 weeks, and quit on the spot when they demanded I sign the write-up. ER veterinarian. It was a week on then week off, but the week on was around 100 hours. Having to put to sleep so many animals with such sad stories. Very short-staffed. I had such PTSD from that job I couldn't drive down that street for about 5 years after I quit. Second worst was construction, holding the stop slow sign. We had 12-hour shifts and just standing there in the hot sun, not allowed to sit down, and with nothing to do but stare straight ahead. Nobody close enough to talk to. Kitchen porter. I was working for a temp agency and most of the jobs they gave me were kitchen porter, a fancy word for a dishwasher, shifts. Some shifts were okay, but there were several shifts where I was portering on my own and I had so many pots, pans and dishes to wash up single-handedly, and often I wouldn't get more than a 30 minutes break in an 8-hour shift. On one shift I got shouted at by the head chef for not cleaning a couple of pots well enough. I was glad to get out of that shit show. One summer in college I found a job at a local cotton mill. For 12 hours each day I rolled barrels of cotton back and forth between 2 different stages of processing. Once my feet got used to it, it wasn't physically demanding. But I couldn't take the tedium and boredom. There was no time to stop and talk to anyone and no thought involved in the job at all. I'm an introvert, but I discovered I need a little human interaction in a 12-hour period. I left after about a month. King Soopers Kroger Deli. The manager was uptight, mean, and made the job miserable. Not to mention all the food waste I had to not only witness, but participate in that made me angry. Being on my feet all day hurt, the contact is hand washing and wearing powdered gloves messed up my hands, and the 30 minutes breaks were never enough. The schedules were put up the week before, so it was always unpredictable and made it difficult for me to plan anything. Worked at a hotel and only lasted a week. It's called Geyser Grand, amazing hotel with great reputation, but oh my god, the owner's wife is a fucking nut job. I rolled my best friend's car a few days after starting there, was having seizures and had a really bad concussion. She allowed me 1 day off, then had me back in for 3 12-hour shifts for 3 days in a row. She's snippy and rude, entitled, and just straight up a bitch to the staff. Walmart. Worked there for 4 years and it made me want to game over. Got fired for calling out too many times. It was because my father was literally about to die because he kept getting C. diff every time he went to the hospital. The first time was for ulcerative colitis, got C. diff infection, went home, infection got worse, went back to hospital to get it treated, it got better, went home, got worse again, rinse, repeat. Portrait photographer that went around from Kmart to Kmart in the early 90s. 12-hour, no break days, traveling by car from city to city. Shitty per diem, and all they cared about is if I sold photo frames. and some of the parents I dealt with had no business being parents. One in particular was in my face because I couldn't make his son smile. He's not smiling because you're his dad. I quit a few weeks after I went solo. Schlotzskis. Now that I've left, a part of me misses it. But I didn't forget everything. I didn't forget how awesome it was in the beginning. How managers acted like leaders. I didn't forget how downhill it went after it got bought out. The new owners took away any form of discounts, single-handedly killed my old store. How they stopped caring about the employees, it became just another way to line their pockets. Working at industrial factory Henkel, for chemicals, my lungs hurt from the smell. We had to do some deadlifting with some of the boxes weighted about 25-30 kilograms every 30 minutes. There was no AC, so when it's summer it's hot AF, when it's winter it's cold AF, and you sweat a lot, and also the people are negative, nervous and shitty. I hate those 8 months that I worked there. Lost about 15 kilograms weight. My best decision was to quit. I worked at one of the carnival games, throw darts at balloons on the boardwalk down the Jersey Shore for about 2 weeks. The boss wanted us to scam all of the customers and never let anyone win a prize except tiny plushies. The customers were either angry parents with kids crying because they wanted to win the big prizes, or drunk teenagers. It was hot as hell. I quit the day I got my first paycheck.